All right, welcome everybody. So excited to be here today to talk about feeding preemies and NICU babies. I'm Jen Saxton. I'm the founder and CEO of Tot Squad, and I am co-hosting this panel today with Boppy, one of our favorite breastfeeding and baby product companies. And they are providing this education as part of the Mom Kind Project, which is their corporate social responsibility initiative that helps bring education and resources to new parents. And we are really excited to be here on Giving Tuesday with a nonprofit partner called Love for Lily. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a few minutes so we can learn a little bit more about them. As people are joining, you can feel free to put your information in the comments. Let us know if you are still pregnant or if your baby has already arrived, how old they are, and feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. And we'll get to them as soon as we can and try to leave some time at the end for those as well. For anybody who may be here that hasn't registered yet, make sure that you sign up at the Zoom registration screen because that's where we will be picking a winner for our Boppy giveaway. And we are giving away the Comfy Hug hybrid newborn baby carrier. I personally tried out this carrier with my baby about 9 months ago when she was born for several months, and it is awesome. We're going to talk a bit more about baby wearing and how beneficial it can be for your baby, especially when they're a preemie, in a few minutes. So on that note, let's move into some introductions. Again, I'm Jen from Tot Squad. Tot Squad is a marketplace that connects new and expecting parents with services like lactation support. And I am really excited to introduce our first panelist, which is Brandy. Here we go back to Brandy. All right, Brandy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I guess I forgot to mention also, I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old who is still nursing, and I nursed my first daughter for 16 months. Neither were preemies, but my second daughter was born at 37 weeks and 2 days. So she was early. All right, Brandy, take it away.
Hi, I'm Brandy. I'm a pediatric nurse, a postpartum doula, and an international board certified lactation consultant. I'm here based in California, the San Francisco Bay Area. I have 4 children. My oldest is 18, and then I have a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And I breastfed and pumped with all of them. And very well versed in lactation, both professionally as well as personally with my own children.
That's great. Thank you so much. We're glad to have you today, Brandy. Thanks. All right, next up, we have April Kerwood. Go ahead and introduce yourself, April. Oops, you're on mute.
Here I am. I am April Kerwood. I'm a postpartum doula and certified lactation counselor. I work in the homes with parents when they're transitioning with their babies. So that is the space where I help them smooth out all the edges and just get their sea legs, their feet under them while they're transitioning to life with the newborn. I have 4 kids of my own that range from 15 to 7 years old. So they keep me plenty busy, and my breastfeeding relationship with them was sort of what spurred me on this work. So I'm happy to see y'all today.
Awesome. So glad to have you. Okay, next up, we have Katie Nicholas. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a NICU nurse, lactation consultant, and a mom of a 6-year-old. And I have a fairly new business called Hungry Tiny Humans, which is more heavy on Instagram, but just resources, education, and support for all things infant feeding related. And definitely NICU and preemie feeding struggles and the process for it is definitely one of my passions.
That's great. So happy to have you, Katie. All right, next up, we have Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cahoon. I am the founder and executive director of Love for Lily. I'm also Lily's mama. And we are so excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Teresa, and I'm the development director at Love for Lily. And I'm mom to Finn, who is a 24-weeker, and Shelby, who is a 36-weeker. And I've experienced pumping, and I did successfully breastfeed my daughter for 16 months. So I was able to transition on oxygen.
That is great. Well, we are really excited to have you guys here today. Do you want to tell us, before we do more, tell us just a little bit about Love for Lily? And we're going to have more time to talk about you guys in a few minutes, but give us the quick overview about the organization and the kind of work that you guys do.
We provide support for families while they're in the NICU, as well as when they do transition home with their littles, from micro preemies all the way to naughty 40 weekers who make their way to the NICU. We support families through coaching. Hello, little one. As well as support groups, bringing them together to build community, empowering them to be part of their child care, really feel like parents in the NICU, and connecting them to other resources and incredible organizations here in Colorado and beyond.
Sorry, I muted myself while I was trying to mute the other background noise. That is great. Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here today. And because it is Giving Tuesday, I did just want to encourage anybody who's attending, if you're looking for a nonprofit to support today, Love for Lily is an amazing organization. Can you guys just give us a quick spiel on where folks can donate if they're looking for a charity to support today?
Yeah, you can donate on Facebook. Facebook is matching the first $2 million donated today.
Wow.
So got a good chunk there. You can also donate on our website, loveforlily.org. LOVEFORLILY, just one L in Lily.org. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully you guys will have a very successful Giving Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So I've already introduced myself. So first up, we're going to have Katie share a bit about what to expect with a preemie. And as a NICU nurse, I think she knows a lot about this. So first, can you just give us the quick definition of like, what is a preemie? And you know, I was saying my baby was born at 37 weeks and 2 days and was not considered a preemie. So tell us the technical definition.
Sure. So technically, we have a lot of micro definitions, but 34 to 36 and 6 weeks gestation would be your late preterm baby, and before 34 weeks would definitely be your premature baby. So the late pretermers are technically premature as well, but they get their own little label.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think Teresa, was it you who said you had a 24-week baby? I remember that being such a big milestone in my pregnancies, being able to know that the baby was like viable and could possibly survive if they were born that early. Although I think there was recently a new record, a baby born at 21 weeks, something.
Yep.
So yeah, which is just the modern marvels of medicine. Absolutely amazing how far technology has come. So can you share a little bit about, you know, when do you start making milk and how can you be prepared for breastfeeding?
Sure. So one, I think that education's your biggest friend when it comes to being prepared for breastfeeding. So a lot of parents who have preemies tell me, I was signed up to take my class in a week or in 2 weeks. And so they don't really get that formal prenatal education that is often a parent's goal. So I think that now in this day and age, there's so much out on social media, and also there are so many amazing resources to make sure you still get educated and give yourself that moment to empower yourself for the breastfeeding journey, because it does look a little bit different for a premature baby. But the process of making milk is still the same, whether your baby's term or preterm. So your body starts to make milk around 16 weeks of pregnancy, and that milk's already there. So a lot of parents fear when they have a premature baby that I don't have any milk. A lot of term parents feel I don't have any milk when they have their baby. But you've had this milk all along. It's in there. You just now have to know how to work with your body and work together to get that milk. When you have a preemie baby, it's not necessarily going to work the same way as a term baby, but you do have to tell your body that you had a term baby. So your goals are still the same, whether you have your baby at 24 weeks or 41 weeks, your goal is to get to full milk production, if possible, between day 10 and day 14. So what that typically looks like for a parent of a preemie is that you're going to be combining hand expression and pumping, especially in those early days. The first 48 hours, hand expression is your friend, and that is going to be more successful even at getting breast milk out of your body. And when possible, you want to stimulate yourself 8 to 10 times a day in a 24-hour period. It is a lot of work, and generally most parents of preemies have just been through a pretty traumatic situation. They may be medically unstable too. So use your resources, use your nurses, use any support person you have with you to hold the flanges on, to clean your parts for you. And that's really what your initial stimulation of breast milk is going to come from.
I mean, I think that the lactation consultant in my hospital was actually hand expressing me for me, like really teaching me how to do it. We had like a little tiny baby spoon we were trying to squeeze the colostrum into.
Absolutely.
Which was, I never would have imagined that I would have somebody like extracting the colostrum from me, but I'm so glad that she did.
Yeah, and very often parents of premature babies have blood pressure issues and are on a medication that's magnesium that makes them feel absolutely terrible. So, you know, you had a term baby and you needed someone to hand express for you. If you feel terrible and your body is in recovery, you might absolutely need someone to hand express for you, and that is great. Like, find your support, find your resources, use the lactation consultants in the hospital, use your postpartum nurses, and have them help you for sure.
Absolutely. And so then when does your so the colostrum, well, maybe talk a little bit about what is colostrum and when your actual milk comes in.
Perfect. So basically you deliver your placenta, and that does a whole hormone cascade that makes you start to create some milk. And your initial milk is this thick, gooey, wonderful substance called colostrum. And it is so full of all the immunity properties and fats and amazing things, but it's really thick. And so that's why I say hand expression can be a little more effective, because it's hard to get it all the way through your pump parts. So it starts out as colostrum. And as your body goes through the supply and demand of either the pump or a baby nursing, then your body will start to produce more and more. Generally, we refer to milk coming in or your milk volume increasing. It happens often day 3 to 5, but especially if you've had medical situations that often lead to preterm delivery, there might be a little delay. So try not to get discouraged, just keep going, keep pumping as often as you can. And then your goal is for that colostrum to transition toward mature milk, which happens around day 10 to 14, give or take. Everybody's a little bit different.
That's great. And so as your milk transition, it changes colors a bit. Can you just talk about the like normal colors of breast milk? Because I remember being kind of surprised about like the golden milk phenomenon.
Yeah, so I'll actually start by saying pretty much all colors are normal. You can have strawberry pink milk, you can have brown milk from what's called rusty pipe syndrome. That's normal. If your colostrum is brown, totally fine, feed it to the baby. It can be a golden yellow. Some people, as they transition to mature milk, they actually stay that golden milk yellow. Others will turn a whitish blue color. If you get a lot of B vitamins, it might be kind of green. If you have too many carrot juices, it might turn orange. But essentially, all milk is amazing milk. Feed it to your baby.
I literally had kind of like neon green milk last week, and I thought like mold had gotten into my pump parts or something. I was like panicking. I was Googling all of the colors. So that is reassuring.
The rainbow is good.
That's great. And so does your breast size impact your milk supply? Because I know a lot of moms who are still waiting to have their baby can like feel nervous, like I don't have small breasts, like am I gonna be able to breastfeed?
Right, absolutely. Breast size has absolutely nothing to do with how much milk you're going to produce. There are actually a lot of overproducers who are on the smaller side. So it has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is all about milk capacity, and we really don't know what our capacity is till we're in it. So it'll just be unique to you what your milk capacity will be.
And so then how can you tell if the baby is getting enough milk? Is it the diapers, or what's the best way?
Well, if it's okay, I'd like to take a step back just to the NICU. What does breastfeeding even look like in the NICU as your baby's going through their prematurity? Because the how does your baby know that how do you know if your baby's getting enough really doesn't apply to them when they go home, because you've already been through this whole process. So typically where it's going to start is skin to skin and pumping. So that's phase one. And it's really going to depend on your baby's stability. Not every baby can be held right away. It might take days, weeks, but we have a lot of creative ways to be able to touch and connect with your baby, to empower you to parent your baby, whether it's helping to take a temperature, changing a diaper, being able to do what we call hand cuddling, or even putting yourself in a little bit for a bear hug. It might start like that. And any connection and physical touch with baby, pump right afterwards. You've got all the yummy baby hormones going through you. And then as your baby starts to become a little bit more stable, then you'll start to be able to do your skin to skin and pump right afterwards. Skin to skin is amazing for both of you. And generally we like to do it for the full 3 hours in between your sets of cares. So snuggle and then pump. Then you transition toward what we call non-nutritive breastfeeding, where your baby's probably still too premature to coordinate sucking, swallowing, and breathing, because that tends to happen around 34 weeks. So what we do is we empty your breasts with pumping and let your baby nuzzle on the breast without getting overwhelmed by actual milk volume coming at them. So as often as your medical team says you're okay to do it, that's awesome. And do your non-nutritive usually till around 34 weeks or till we're seeing your baby is more mature. And then we transition toward nursing.
That's great. So the NICU nurses will actually tell you when it's time to like start trying to nurse instead of pump.
Yeah, yep. And as you transition through that, and typically a preemie is going to be what's called triple fed almost till their due date. So most preemies are not able to exclusively nurse because they just don't have those big fat squishy cheeks that help create that suction. So they often will get a little bit tired. So when it goes for your transition toward going home, you will then offer a bottle and have to pump, which is a lot, doing all three things. So I usually recommend for parents, it really depends on the baby. If the baby's amazing at nursing, you could probably do it a little more often. But if they're not there yet and just not transferring, maybe do that at your most optimal 2 or 3 times during the day when you're feeling your best, because doing it around the clock is exhausting and you need to really keep your tank a little bit full. So yeah, so when it comes to coming home, you're likely going to be supplementing potentially with your own breast milk. And that's how you know that your baby is getting enough. You offer the bottle, and as they get more and more mature, they'll take less from the bottle and take more from your breast. Working with a lactation consultant's great too, because you can do pre and post weights to see how much is your baby actually transferring at the breast, to see as they start to transition then toward exclusive nursing, if that's your goal or what your feeding plan is.
Absolutely. That's great. I did not know all that. There's some good nuggets here. And so, can you tell me when will your NICU or preemie baby be discharged from the hospital? Like, how will you know when the baby's ready to go home?
Yeah, so generally the 3 things we need a baby to do is eat by mouth, stay warm, and be able to breathe on their own with a form of oxygen that can go home. So it's okay for them to go home if it's something that they can go home with. So your team should help prime you a little bit, but what's always interesting in the preemie journey is that, you know, when the baby's critically ill, most parents understand and recognize that their baby needs to be there. And so they almost get blindsided when it's suddenly time for their baby to come home and they've gotten really dependent on monitors and other people. So really, as soon as your baby starts to eat by mouth, start kind of priming yourself, your body, your house, your relationship, if you have a partner, for that transition, because some kids are what we call light bulb kids, where they reach the maturity, ding, and 24 to 48 hours of eating by mouth and they're getting discharged. So those are the 3 criteria: is the warmth, eating by mouth, and breathing. And they will have to have a couple of tests before they go home, like the car seat test. Anyone who is small or born before 37 weeks will need to be in their car seat on a monitor for usually around 90 minutes to make sure that they're stable and find out what their settings need to be for going home in that car seat.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, Katie, well, we're going to pass it on over to April to talk a little bit about coming home with your baby. April, you got to take yourself off mute. There you go.
I did.
Good job. So, what supplies do you recommend a new family should have on hand for when they get home from the hospital?
Well, I loved what Katie said about just transitioning home. I think she spoke so succinctly to that about being in the hospital, and how parents become really reliant on the monitors and that feedback, because being in a home with parents after having that reliance and that comfort in that, I mean, they needed that, can be so unsettling. So I
Even
love
with a
that
full
they're
term
professional.
baby, I was terrified. that they would send me
Absolutely.
home a few
Yes.
days after my C-section. So
This is why we have jobs as postpartum doulas. Yes. So I like the way Katie was already prepping them to say, start thinking about what this is going to look like in your own space, because they were thrown such a curveball. So I would say for every family that might be a little bit different, what kind of support does your baby still need? So we have wonderful professionals in the hospital making sure their baby is healthy enough to be in our home and be safe. But if the stress of that is not covered, then who are we bringing in is probably the most critical thing, instead of not just a thing. Like, I love baby items and the things that help us feel comforted, but really for every family, I think it's going to look a little bit different as far as who they gather to help create peace around this transition.
yeah, especially
So
if
I
the
would
baby has arrived earlier than family can travel in.
Absolutely.
Or, I mean, I live in California and our family is in Texas and Florida. And so it's like
yeah.
not having that support system. It's so great to be able to kind of have a sense of who your team is going to be on the ground to support you.
Yeah. So I would say gather people to set up your nursing area or your pumping area with all the things that you're going to need. So, like I said, like to what Katie said, is start thinking about what is this going to look like for you at home. So making sure that you have kind of the wherewithal to say, you know, I really will be comfortable here in this space where we tend to hang out, or you know what, like it's going to be better for me to be someplace like the nursery is comforting to me because I just like the thought that that's what I made for my baby, and now my baby is home. And I think sometimes we can underestimate
oh my gosh.
Is that better? I don't know
yes.
what happened there. I could hear my own voice, and that was not
that's okay.
not as pleasant.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, I know I had like my hospital go bag not packed when my baby ended up arriving early at 37 weeks, and I'm sure there's a lot of other families that like end up in that panic scramble, or like trying to make a list to send your spouse back home to pack things and bring back to the hospital. And some of the things that I brought with me were like, I brought my pump to the hospital because I was so nervous. I felt like I needed somebody to like show me how to use it. As well as my breastfeeding pillow. I'm of course a big fan of the Boppy pillows. And then some families even like to have formula on hand because they're nervous about their ability to breastfeed. Like, is there anything else you would add to that in terms of like thinking about what supplies to have with you?
Yeah, I would say everything that would go on a nursing cart when you were making a cart, you know, even a full-term baby. So maybe you want breast pads and things for your comfort. I would say the thing that we sort of overlook sometimes is the thing for the mom. So you're like, I want my breast pump and like all of these things for breastfeeding, but what about you? Like, can we fill it with snacks? Can we make sure that there's like extra water? You know, do you want a book? Like, I don't know. What do you need? Is there a cord for your phone? So you don't feel so disconnected. What is going to make you feel comfortable? Do you have a stool? All of those things. So the true like breastfeeding items, yes, breast pads, lanolin if you like it. You know, all of the pump supplies. I would say you cannot have, if you're still pumping in that space, you cannot have too many extra parts. Because when we're talking about all the times, all the hours, it is well worth the money and energy saved to have a little bucket where you put dirty parts and you get to them when you can. So I would say something like that sometimes is overlooked. That is such good money spent, is having extras so that it doesn't feel like you're under the gun the next time you sit to nurse or pump to wash it. It's already ready to go.
That is so smart. I totally agree. And so what about introducing a pacifier? I know that like over the years, the guidance has changed, and I'm not even sure if there is specific guidance around preemies about when they can use a pacifier. Oh, Katie's like, yeah.
Yeah, Katie.
So I do want to chime in here because even the lactation community is behind the fact that pacifiers are important for preemies. They help, especially when they're not quite mature enough to handle the suck, swallow, breathe. We have them suck on their pacifier during their tube feedings to help associate the sucking and nutrition and feeling full. So for a preemie, there's actually never a time where we might say that pacifiers will lead to nipple confusion, because honestly, preemies don't necessarily face nipple confusion. They just are going to eat how they can eat when they're ready to eat that way. So pacifiers are suggested for preemies in the NICU. And then there is research that it is a prevention measure for SIDS. So we do recommend it even when they come home.
Yeah, I feel like that the fact that it became a prevention measure for SIDS like changed between my first two babies. The first time I was nervous about introducing the passy. The second time in the NICU, I mean not the NICU, just in the hospital, they're like, yes, use the passy. So for anybody here this is their second baby, the guidance has changed and there's definitely encouragement.
Yeah, and I will add, my son never took a pacifier no matter how hard I pushed it. So there's that side too. So don't worry if it doesn't happen. You can't make a kid do anything. You can just guide and nurture.
Oh my gosh. All right, so April, maybe I'll come back to you on a question we didn't get back to with Katie, which was just about the diapers. So what should diaper output look like for a baby to like show that they're getting enough milk?
Well, I think you're going to come home from the hospital with sort of a baseline for what's been happening. So you just want to see that continue truly, depending on when they are discharged and when you're at home. I think you're going to have seen the changes through milk transitioning already. So that's good education that parents of preemies are going to get, because those things are going to look similar to a full-term baby. So you just want to make sure, you know, that the question with always breastfeeding is how do we know they're getting enough? So wet and poopies, you know, if we're in it, then we're probably doing okay. But I would say continuing the baseline from the hospital at home and just knowing, you know, some parents are tracking that via an app or just writing it down, whatever brings them comfort to know that this is going smoothly. And then they're going to have that baseline too of output from pumping at the hospital versus home. And when we see dips in that, then we address that with the supply and demand, right? We need to stimulate our breasts more, or we need to reevaluate how the baby is looking at the breast or at the bottle or whatever is happening there. So I would say continuing what we're doing at the hospital and like just being on it with some measurable items via an app or keeping track. Some of my moms really love pen and paper still, and I'm for it. So I however brings them comfort, right? Whichever way it looks the best to them, but taking what has been happening in the hospital and supporting that and like continuing that when they get home is also just a way that they just feel settled. So if we tell them, if we say, hey, you know, this is what was happening in the hospital, this is what we want to see you continue to do at home, it's almost like this bridge and it steps them into the daily life at home and more confident. So I would just love to see that continue. And then they have eyes for, you know, anything that looks a little off and know how to wrangle and help then.
That's great. And I mean, I think at that point in time, you're probably seeing your pediatrician very frequently. So you can continue to get ongoing guidance as you're having questions about your baby and if they're hitting the appropriate milestones in terms of their weight gain and number of diapers and everything that they should be having based on their status when they left the hospital. So I know Katie hit a little bit on teaching the baby about the sucking reflex, and sometimes that takes a little while to establish for the preemie babies. But so how can you know if your baby is getting a deep latch? Like, does it hurt when the baby is nursing?
Well, this is another area where we're going to say, you know, lactation professionals will have their different words that they use around the different things. So, you know, the act of breastfeeding is so new. And even if you're a mother of many, every time you have a new baby, it may feel, look, be different. So that's normal. And I think that that's grossly underestimated when we talk to women having babies. They say, I love your head, Katie. Yes. Like, she's like, yes, yes. And it's so good. But we don't tell them enough, like, hey, you've done this. You know, we have women, personally, I was one who went from nursing one child, had a little break in a pregnancy and was nursing another. And I went, wait, I thought I had this figured out, because it's a new baby, a new mouth, a new everything. So we are welcoming full little humans into the world, and they will bring their own little picadillos and little personalities to what they're doing. So so knowing that it may look different every time. But when we have that deep latch, when we have the good suck, swallow, pause that we were talking about, babies organizing after being premature, we're going to have some tugging, and it may be a little uncomfortable. What we don't want to see is sharp pain, because then we're possibly introducing damage, and anything that is damaged is not going to be sustainable, because then we're doing all the things, we're pumping, we have the baby at the breast. That's not sustainable ongoing. So it is a tricky little thing. So when we talk to clients, sometimes it's like, look, if there is pain, if I see you like this, then we need to address it. If you're like, that's a little something, then that, and it settles as the baby gets rhythmic and things become peaceful, then we can probably assume that we're doing okay. But you know, it's a new system, so it's okay for it to be a learning, there to be a learning curve there.
Yeah.
What we don't want to see is sharp pain that indicates damage, because then we're introducing a whole host of other issues.
I went to the lactation consultant like once a week for the first 12 weeks, like just trying to really get the latch perfect for my full-term baby. So I can only imagine how challenging this can be with like such precious little preemie babies. So I know there's two types of holds that the lactation consultants were. I'm like, is it hamburger and hot dog or something? It's like the C shape. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I remember I was doing a lot of that in the early days, trying to get the baby to latch.
Well, when we talk about a good latch, I think one of the most important things is we as professionals can see a baby in a breast and go, that looks good to me, but we always need to ask, which is what you just said. We need to say, how does that feel? And what is that? Do you feel that tug? Do you start hearing that rhythmic sucking? And then when it comes to mom's anatomy and holding her breast, what we want her to be able to do is get as much nipple and areola in the baby's mouth as possible. So if that means creating manageable size bites, then that's what we're really doing. So, it can be a matter of preference, anatomy, when it comes to what kind of hold or how you want to hold your breast. But the whole idea around any specific kind of hold, whether it's a C hold, or we talk about making a sandwich, or, a nipple flip into the mouth, whatever that is, what we're really doing is making sure that the baby is not nipple feeding. We're breastfeeding. We want nipple and areola and as much of that tissue as possible, so that baby's tongue can wag under that breast tissue and the milk can be released and transferred effectively. So really it's just a matter of like, can I make it manageable? And sometimes when we talk about breasts, that can be an issue of engorgement, right? If we have a really full breast, that's going to be harder to fit in an itty bitty baby mouth. So that's when we talk about using our hands before we start a nursing session, just to soften up and get things moving. Hands are perfect for that. And then just kind of grab what you can and work with your baby's anatomy to get as much of that breast tissue back in their mouth.
Absolutely. And so April, one last question before we pass it over to Brandy to talk a bit more. Can you talk a little bit about mom's mental health? So I know in those early days when you are trying to nurse the baby every 2 to 3 hours, and you're up and you're not getting like solid long-term stretches of sleep and your hormones are going crazy, or maybe you are struggling to breastfeed and are not actually producing enough milk or having some other issue. When and how do you recommend moms consider using formula or seeking additional support for their mental health? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about preemie moms transitioning home, we have this great support system that makes them feel like they have a safety net. So when we transition home, that being gone can be really disconcerting, like I said, and what we need is education, which I think, preemie parents get in in triplicate in the hospital, which is amazing, learning about what their baby's needs are and what their baby's growth has been. They get to see their babies grow sort of in a way like with measurable steps that I think can translate in a really positive way when they're home, as long as we make sure that they have the confidence to know that their baby can do that at home too, with under their care. So I think what I love to use with clients is the Edinburgh scale. I think it's really important. It's the scale for perinatal mood disorders. It's a ranking, and it kind of just tells you where you are on a day-to-day basis, because confidence can be a giant part of how we feel. And then we want to be watching for those things in case there is a true mood disorder happening. So I love when I hear that doctors are, have handed that out and parents have come home with that. I think any kind of support, I think all parents should have support when they come home, just to have eyes on them, whoever they are, whatever their situation was with their baby, just to know that they have, non-judgmental, loving support around them for all the little things, because the more eyes we have on new parents, the more confident they actually become faster. So, parents in isolation don't get that same sort of boost as far as what, yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in that also, it's good to know that for people any parent who's been in the NICU, there are really high rates of PTSD. So in addition to all these skills, honestly, for any NICU parent, I recommend reaching out to the professionals right away, because one, every parent has to grieve the birth they didn't have, and they have to grieve the journey and deal with the traumas that they've already been through. But a lot of parents keep that in while they're in the NICU, and especially dads tend to have their mental health breaks more like 6 months post-discharge. And what that tends to look like is shutting down, being snappy, and those are really difficult times for a new mom to approach. And then moms tend to feel it as soon as they get home. That's when it starts to get a bit more out of control and some of the PTSD gets triggered. So I recommend for anyone, even if you've had a 5-day antibiotic NICU stay, that warrants going and actually seeing a professional, because there are likely underlying things that came up and can be triggered really easily later in parenting, and it's good to work through them right away.
Absolutely. And if you're like me, you end up with a C-section or an expensive early birth, you've probably met your deductible and you can get access to low cost or free therapy. So I was actually happy I had my baby in February, because I met my deductible so early in the year I could get help throughout the year. And I would just add, I know that Boppy is a company that really wants to support moms and help make their breastfeeding journey as easy as possible. But at the same time, like, your mental health is the most important thing for you to be a great mother. And so we all support that fed is best. And if you feel like your mental health is suffering because breastfeeding is challenging for you, like, please feel free to introduce formula. There is absolutely no shame in that. Like, your most important job is to take care of yourself and to take care of your baby. And if that means using formula, then don't feel like you have failed your child. I think there's a lot of negative feelings that people can have around that. And like, we are just all here to tell you, like, you're not a failure. You've got to take care of your mental health first. Okay, thank you so much, April. I'm going to pass it on over to Brandy. So Brandy, let's talk a little bit about overcoming challenges and like how moms can make breastfeeding work for them. Can you share a little bit about kind of the like most common challenges that you see and things that can go wrong with preemie NICU babies or just with breastfeeding in general?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that I see as a lactation consultant in my own practice and also with myself, having my own 4 kids, is there's a lot of support in the hospital. When you have your baby, you have the nurses around you, you have lactation consultants, you have doctors, pediatricians, and then when you go home, it's a different story. Katie and April talked about the support, that's very important for the mental health, the support for the mother and the new baby. And a lot of times mothers do not have that support. They don't know who to reach out to when they're at home and the baby is not latching, or they have a perception that they're not making the milk for the baby. or they're having engorgement issues or anything, sleep deprivation, things like that. So that's mainly the things that I see in my own practice.
Yeah, I mean, I had major engorgement issues when my milk came in, and a doctor friend of mine actually sent me a study that showed that cabbage leaves can actually help with the pain from engorgement and prolong breastfeeding. Whereas I had this narrative in my head that it was going to like dry up all my milk and I wasn't going to be able to nurse the baby. And so, you know, I think being able to find trusted resources for those challenges as they come up is really important. We actually had a question in the chat that's a little bit related to this. So I just want to ask you, I think it's Marisol said, I am late in my pregnancy and I've been told I should brush my nipples to prepare them for breastfeeding to avoid it being painful. Is this something you would recommend? And I've never actually heard of this. So I'm curious to hear what you think, Brandy.
Yeah, so there's a theory out there that if you toughen up your nipples before you start breastfeeding, that you're not going to have the
Oop, you cut out, Brandy. Brandy, can you hear us? We can't hear you. You're not on mute. Oh no, we lost your audio. Try again. Do you have earpods in, Brandy? Did they die?
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. What part did you miss?
I don't even know. Katie's talking, but I can't see what you're saying.
I was just saying most of it. I think it was just the end of the mentioning the theory about toughening up nipples and then.
Okay. So yeah, that's a theory. People have that theory because they feel like if they toughen up their nipples when they latch their baby onto the breast, they're not going to have the cracking and the bleeding and any type of nipple injury. But that all has to do with the latch. I know that Katie and April were talking about getting the deep wide latch with the baby and that taking some time to work on. And so that's just a theory to brush your nipples. It's all about the latching the baby correctly.
All right. So yeah, when I asked the question, I saw everybody nodding their heads no. So I don't think we're recommending that you have to do that. I would just work with a lactation consultant after the baby arrives if you are having pain, so you can get out of pain as quickly as possible. So Brandy, and I'm sure that this varies for NICU babies versus full-term babies, but some babies might struggle to take the bottle. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what are the different bottle nipple sizes about? I know even though I had a full-term baby, my consultants had recommended that I purchase preemie size bottle nipples. And I didn't even know that there were such a thing as different sized nipples for your bottle when I was a first-time mom. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so we recommend if you are doing a combination of bottle feeding and breastfeeding that you use preemie size nipples. Preemie size nipples vary depending on the type of bottle that you use. I know for Dr. Brown's it's a 0+, and for other bottle manufacturers it may be different on the packaging. And we have you use that because it's a slower flow. And so if you are breastfeeding and the baby's getting used to taking a bottle, the flow is slower and the baby has to mimic the force and the energy that it takes to breastfeed as they're bottle feeding as well.
That's great. Yes, great advice. So you the bottles that you might buy off the shelf might come with a higher nipple size. So I realized I had to purchase bottles separate from the nipples
Yes.
to get those preemie sizes. So you can find them at most resource centers and on like Amazon major retailers.
Right. So the bottles that I got, the Dr. Brown's, they come with a size 1. So when I was breastfeeding and pumping for my children, I ended up ordering the 0+ for the Dr. Brown preemie from Amazon.
Yeah. Katie, you want to jump in?
I was just going to mention that you can also, if you're still in the NICU, toward the end of your NICU stay, bring in your own bottles to trial that out with your baby while they have everybody around them with, you know, occupational therapists, et cetera. And that way, you know that those bottles are working well for your baby.
That's great. Great tip. So Brandy, how can folks increase their milk supply? I know one of my dear friends had a baby a couple months ago. I mean, she was working so hard on her milk supply for months and months and months, and she was a just enough producer. So she produced just enough for the baby. So can you give us your tips around milk supply?
Yeah, definitely. So milk supply, and Katie and April mentioned, it's a supply and demand type situation. So as soon as the placenta is delivered, like Katie was mentioning, your body, the hormones are triggered and your body starts to produce the colostrum. And then later on, the mature milk comes in. But the more frequently that you're emptying your breasts by the baby breastfeeding, pumping, or a combination of both, your body will create more milk. So you want your breasts to be frequently emptied. When you're pumping, you want to pump about 8 to 12 times a day in order for your breasts to empty as much as they can, so that your brain tells your breasts, we have to fill back up to create that milk for your baby.
And I know some people can just like almost have like a shame spiral. I feel like I'm Brene Brown. But looking at these Instagram photos of freezer stashes where like people have hundreds of ounces of milk, and I know that that's not totally normal. And so is it correct? The average production is really only like 25 ounces a day?
Yes, 25 ounces to 750 mLs per day. And echoing on what April was saying about the mental health situation, for me, I also had to feed with formula on top of producing, because every pregnancy is different. Every breastfeeding journey is different. With my own children, some I was an overproducer, other ones I was an under, low supply. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with, introducing formula, giving your baby the breast milk that your body can make, and then also introducing the formula to the baby. And it's easier said than done, but trying not to compare yourself to what you see on social media. It's when you're in these mommy groups and things on Instagram and Facebook, you'll see mothers who have such a huge stash of frozen breast milk, and you may not, have that much or able to produce that much. But any amount of breast milk that you give your baby is wonderful and beneficial. And, the baby gets all of the nutrients and amazing things from any amount of breast milk they receive.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, one last question before we jump back over to the Love for Lily team. Can you just talk a little bit about mastitis and clogged ducts? Like I personally was an overproducer, so I struggled with these a lot. But I even got a text from a friend the other day saying like, how do I know if it's a clogged duct or if it's mastitis? How can you tell the difference? And what should your kind of next steps be if you think you have either?
Yeah, so mastitis is an infection of the breast. And so you'll have flu-like symptoms. You can get a fever, chills. You'll have redness in the breast area, hot to the touch. That will warrant a trip to your OBGYN for possible antibiotics. A clogged duct is very, very common in breastfeeding. I suffered from them all the time. It comes when the ducts are not fully emptied by breastfeeding and pumping. So what you can do with some breast massage, warm compresses to the affected area will help to get out that clog. And then engorgement, there's a little trick. So your breasts should feel, if they're not engorged, they should feel like your cheeks. So if you kind of touch your cheek and it's soft, that's not engorged. A medium-sized engorgement would be touching the tip of your nose, that kind of feeling. And then super, super engorged would be touching your forehead. So that's when you know, like, okay, my breasts are really, really full. We got to get that milk out. Because if you don't relieve that milk, that's also an indicator of you can get possible mastitis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Brandy. All right, so we're going to pass it over to Sarah and Teresa here. And I would love to talk a little bit about baby wearing and how can that facilitate kangaroo care at home. I'll pass it over to you guys.
Yeah, so we actually recommend the Boppy Comfy Hug for baby wearing at home, because the way it's built, you can have no shirt on and still be totally covered up. Baby's right in the carrier. Mom is going to have no shirt, or dad or grandma. If mom and dad are okay with that.
I mean, I was topless for several weeks after my children were born. So.
By the time you leave the NICU, everyone has seen your boobs usually. So there's just a shift in how we think of them. But baby's going to go into the carrier. You're going to put them on just as if you had a shirt on, but then you can walk around and your hands are free and you're still getting that great kangaroo time, skin to skin. It's going to help with milk. It's going to also help with mental health. Back to what we were talking about before, all the good hormones that come from holding those beautiful beings.
Absolutely. And I would actually add that to the list of products you might want to bring to the hospital and get support with from your nursing team. Is like as a first-time mom, was very nervous about baby wearing, and did I have the baby in the correct position? Was their head supported? I know you're supposed to be able to kiss the top of their head. That's how you know they're high enough and not dangling too low. And there's also a great resource, I believe it's babywearing.org. Where you can find local certified baby wearing consultants who can offer you support if you need just help getting it adjusted the right way. And so can you talk a little bit more about the benefits of skin to skin?
Yeah, do you want to talk about it? Sure. So they, ideally when you have your baby, they're going to put your baby on your chest. And I know all the hospitals in Colorado do this today, but when you have a preemie baby, chances are you're not going to get that baby on your chest. And for various reasons, you may not be holding that baby right away. And so I think we talked about earlier, like just being able to cup your hand on the baby and just providing that touch initially. But then once you do the skin to skin, it's great for lactation. It also helps regulate baby's temperature. So in the incubator, they are being monitored for their temperature, but when you put them on your skin, then they automatically will start to regulate. It'll also help regulate their breath, and they'll not have as many Brady's activities, which is where they stop breathing and all the alarms go off and it's really scary. So it helps regulate everything for baby and for mom and dad. Like we talk about this all the time at Love for Lily. When your baby stops breathing, oftentimes mom and dad stop breathing, right? And so having that skin to skin and regulating breath for both baby and mom helps teach both baby and mom that when the baby stops breathing, you keep breathing and you keep that rhythm going. It helps with weight gain. I mean, there's nothing not beneficial about skin to skin. It is good all the way around. And we also recommend too, that when you're not doing your cares, that you're holding baby as much as humanly possible. And I know all of the hospitals across Colorado are really, really good about that. And Sarah champions it across, we have a virtual group. And so we talk about that a lot too. Like advocate for yourself. You need to hold your baby as much as possible, so long as it's medically safe.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking of the baby's positioning in the carrier, just to make sure that they can breathe and maintain that medical safety, how can you check to make sure their oxygen levels are still good, or how does that look for a family that's in the NICU? Or even bringing a baby home that's still on oxygen? Yeah.
In the NICU, you have lots of monitors to help with that. But at home, we actually have a checklist you can download from our website. And it's really about making sure baby is upright, and again, kissing the top of their head. We're gonna make sure no airways are blocked. So you don't want baby to be like this because they can't breathe well, right? Mm-hmm. Turning head sideways, getting them against your skin. You can feel them also. And Katie, you probably have other good wisdom on this. We use the checklist because it's the safest way, I think, to learn how to carry your baby.
And just real quick with the Comfy Hug carrier, because it's soft and it's not a structured carrier, when you do have oxygen, and we'll post a picture, we have some moms that are using it, you can see the oxygen cord coming out. So always looking for the kinks in the cords, making sure that that from whatever's going from their nose, most of the babies are going to go home on a nasal cannula. So their nose and back and then around, that there's just no kinks in it.
Yep. And I was just going to add, I will put the disclaimer, I am a total safety dork, but prenatally, I went to a baby wearing meetup with certified consultants. And then when my baby was 4 days old, I went back to them because I was, especially in the newborn period back then, I was using a ring sling since we didn't have this lovely Boppy carrier. But I just wanted to really make sure that this was right. And I did the same thing with car seats. There are technicians, there are experts out there. Many are on a volunteer basis or just take tips. So I think, especially when it's your baby's safety and your preemie baby who's been through so much already, I think it's always great to have that outside expert see you and give you the tips and pointers to positioning properly and safely.
Yeah, I'm actually a child passenger safety technician. It's my 12-year anniversary next week.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I was excited to hear you guys talking about the car seat test and just making sure that the baby's head is positioned correctly when they're riding in the car seat as well. And of course, I have to plug Tot Squad because you can find car seat safety techs on there. And hopefully one day we'll be able to get baby wearing experts on there as well. And then I think the last benefit, maybe you could talk a little bit about, Sarah and Teresa, would just be safety with your NICU baby in terms of like strangers touching. I'm sure it's like a very strange time now in a pandemic when everybody is wearing a mask anyway, but is that like extra reassurance or still extra scary? How does baby wearing kind of keep the baby safe?
We talk about this in post NICU group all the time, because when you wear your baby, people are so much less likely to try to touch them. If they're in a, the carriage, what do you call it? Stroller. People just, it's instinctual. You want to touch them. They're so cute, right? You want to kiss them, but something about them being on your body, and there's like a personal bubble for adults that babies don't get. And people they will not reach out and touch them almost ever. Very old women, every once in a while, will try to still kiss them, even if they're on your body, but basically no one else.
Oh my gosh.
And I also recommend, like in the airport, if you are traveling, you can use one of the thin muslin blankets, a nursing cover. You can actually cover over the top because baby's not going to have a mask on, right? Germs are big. Right now, we want to keep not just COVID. We're talking RSV and flu. We want to make sure baby is as protected as possible for right now. Breastfeeding is a great way to do that, help provide some of that good protection. But also putting a barrier like a blanket, not a thick blanket, but a nursing cover or a thin muslin blanket can also just give you one more stage. People are not going to be like, hey, let me look under there at your chest. Adults have a better bubble than babies. Baby wearing can really help with that as well, because you're always going to have them real close to you and provide that bubble for them.
That's
and
great.
with the baby wearing too, like we talk about, they have so much time in the NICU doing skin to skin, especially if you're there, you have a micro preemie and you're there all the time. And, we hear moms all the time, they go home and they're like, I know, but I have other kids at home, or I have the dishes, or it's like life gets stressful. It's like all the things that you don't have, like you don't have that 2 hour to sit and be peaceful with your baby. And the Comfy Hug carrier can just offer that peaceful and still allow you to live life at home. So it's a double whammy there.
Yeah, totally. Being hands-free is great. Well, you're in the final minute.
3-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. With a tiny human, it changes things.
I wish I could just like attach her to me. So she disappeared at the mall last weekend. So that's a story for another day, but I've got my own PTSD I'm working through. So we have 1 minute left. I'm going to send us out and just give Sarah an opportunity to tell us just the brief version, a little bit about Lily's story. And on this Giving Tuesday, giving love for Lily, all of our love and support for this amazing organization. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists for volunteering their time to share this education through the Mom Kind Project, and Boppy for hosting and bringing us all together. For anybody who is in attendance, if you have follow-up questions, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can get you in touch with any of these experts to help answer any further questions that you might have. So on that note, Sarah, I'll pass it to you to just send us off with a little bit more about Love for Lily on Giving Tuesday.
For NICU families, we have virtual support across the nation. Please join us. You can get all those links through social media and on our website, which is linked to all of our beautiful accounts right now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of you being here and for your care for NICU families. It is a journey. And it really does take a lot of support to make it through to the other side. We also here in Colorado have meetups in person and opportunities to build connections for mamas and dads, because the journey doesn't just affect mom, it really affects everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Giving Tuesday, y'all.
Yay. Thank you so much. It was so much fun. I hope that everybody has a wonderful Giving Tuesday and a spectacular holiday season. And to everybody who's expecting a baby, we're wishing you all the best of luck, and please keep in touch. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.